Hello everyone, we're going to be talking about Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory. In his theory, he presents basically that our development is affected by everything that's in our surroundings, and everything around us defines who we are. He puts up four categories, which is the microsystem, the mesosystem, the exosystem, and the microsystem. And to give you a little bit example, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me as a child. My full name is Maribel Jasmine Gomez Cruz, and I was born in Mexico City. The first layer of his theory is the microsystem, and it basically tells you that the various settings that we encounter face to face. This is our immediate settings, and he splits us up into four categories: the home, religion, neighborhood, and school. In my home, I am the oldest granddaughter and the oldest child in my family. I have one younger brother. I was raised by my mother, and I had an absent father. And my grandparents, they don't speak Spanish. They speak Mixteco, which became my second language. And that also has a lot to do with who I am today. The next one is your religious settings. I was raised Catholic, very traditional Catholic, but also with a mix of ancient traditions from my parents' Mixteco ancestry. We were very conservative, and that also led to a lot of issues in my upbringing, and we'll go into those in a little bit later. My school, I was the youngest kid in the first grade. I started first grade when I was 5. I was a little bit of a nerd, and that was just basically because I didn't have close friends. I was very timid and not very social. I really looked up to a lot of my teachers and my students today. My neighborhood, I lived in an area in Mexico City that was considered one of the most dangerous parts of Mexico City. As you can see, my house, that's actually a picture of my house. When I lived there, it was not paved, it was all dirt. And about a mile away, you could see these little pictures that I found about, and that was just literally a mile away. We had the biggest landfill, man-made landfill. People lived there and collected trash and everything, and I walked through those areas every time I had to go to the market or go visit friends and everything. So it was really high poverty, and it has changed. I went back a few years ago, and that it's no longer there. They actually took everything down. They kicked everybody that lived there and built some parks, which is kind of weird. But the place where I live in Mexico City is predominantly very, very poor. And it has a lot of people that come from other states into Mexico City, and that is how we ended up there. So this is the mesosystem. It's a combination of all the little things that are in my microsystem and how they connected to each other. I grew up in a very cultural crash because my parents raised me, my mom and my aunts raised me very traditional based on how they got raised. But I was growing up in Mexico City. Being Catholic also didn't help as much as well. Because I was in Mexico City, Catholicism is celebrated a little bit differently versus my parents' hometown is celebrated a little bit different because they had a mix of Catholic with the ancient traditions. Like I said, because of all that, made me be a little bit shy, a little bit more reserved, very introvert, and I was very much a loner, which also helped me focus more on my studies. I was a nerd. I was pretty much high in my class everywhere I went. Growing up in a very poor part of Mexico City also made me more humble and appreciate everything that I have and be very resourceful. I didn't have calculators. I didn't have anything that was technology based because that costs money and we didn't have the money. So I had to learn how to count in an abacus. If you do not know what that is, you know, pretty ancient. I always wanted a better life because of the way that I grew up in the place where I grew up. Um, but also because of the way I was raised, made me be more independent and cautious at the same time. My neighbors became my family members and also my caretakers because, as I said before, I was raised by a single mom, um, and um, they would take care of me while she was at work. Um, I had to grow up acting a little bit different around people in the city, around my family, and also around my grandparents because, they could not assimilate to my city life. So when I was in their hometown, I had to act a little bit different. Also, not having my father cannot make a huge impact in my life. My ecosystem is basically everything that it's not affect us a little bit more, but it's not included. I'm not included in it. My mom's jobs, various jobs growing up, had a lot to do with who I am. She used to sell food in the streets of Mexico City, and she would have a little cart like that, and my brother and I will fit in there, and we will go with her all day. Eventually, she became a cop, um, but she didn't have a lot of education. Neither of my parents. They didn't complete the university system. My mom finished high school. My dad kind of finished like a technical school kind of thing. Um, the government in Mexico was very corrupt, and a lot of people didn't trust the government, didn't trust the police, didn't trust anybody who was an official. So that's kind of the way we grew up to be. I grew up when the little first guy over there was president, and then I left Mexico when the second guy was president, and then I watched Mexico from far after that. Soccer is a huge thing in Mexico. I'm a huge soccer fan, even though I don't play. I never was there. I was a nerd. I was artistic, but I was not the athletic one. Religious ways, um, I grew up around Pope Juan Pablo was alive, and he was in Mexico a lot of times, and that was a big deal, and I remember that a lot. If you are Hispanic, I think not just Mexican, but we grew up in the world of novelas, which kind of give us a false sense of beauty and security, especially for younger girls. And I think that's true everywhere now these days as well. Um, but that's my ecosystem. And then the last stage is the macro system, which is pretty much my values and the customs and everything else that came from having um, everything else around me. So I'll start. I grew up in a house that's predominantly female. These are all my aunts and I like I say I'm the oldest granddaughter, but you can see my mom and my aunts. There are eight of them, and then two boys. Um, Also, you can see that I was a little bit later. It's just because I am a mix of Spanish and Indian, which I'm gonna go over that in a second. We have a huge family. Uh, I have a lot of older traditions based on my parents' traditions, but as I came to the United States, I adapted a little bit more, and I don't follow them as close as they would like to. Um, Sorry about my fingers were going everywhere while I was filming this. Um, and so it was a little bit of a mix of the two cultures that I grew up. And then I came to the United States, and now I have three or cultures, which is, you know, really hard to know where you don't quite belong fully in anything. Mexico is it's we don't have a lot of racism based on color, but we do have classism, which is the way that Mexico is differentiated. You have the Spaniards at the very top, the Criollos and Mestizos, which is what I am. I am a mix of Spanish and Indians, or the natives of Mexico. And then, of course, you have the Negros or the Mulattoes. We don't have as much of a slave system in Mexico, um, because the Indians were there, or the natives, indigenous people were there, and they're gonna use us to replace them, kind of thing. So they took away our lands and everything else. So it was quite a shock. Um, I found this little picture, the privilege of being white Mexican. I was kind of fortunate to be a little bit on the lighter skin than some of my other family members. I took on the Spanish side, so I didn't see as much of that. Um, this guy over here, it was the very first Indian uh, president of Mexico, and I really looked up to him, and I really wanted to go study at the bigger university in Mexico City, but that didn't happen because I moved here. Um, but Benito Juarez was very influential in who I ended up wanting to be. Um, so this is my little system. Um, Eventually, you know, this little child will grow up to be a teacher. I love showing my culture and being very proud. It wasn't the case when I came to the United States, because I encountered a different type of racism here, or classism. So I never really said that I was from Mexico. So thank you for watching, and hope you enjoy it. Bye.